1. So to preface this story, I've been really interested in this woman I met at college for quite some time. We'd been texting for quite a while, and I had the balls to ask her on a date not too long ago. She obliged, and we went out for a wonderful first date. And though it was a little awkward, we made out all right. That is not the subject of this story, however. The real fuck-up happened on Monday, when she texts me asking if I wanted to come over after work. We were supposed to go on our second date that night, but I cancelled since I was feeling sick. She thought it would be cute to take care of me and everything, so I said sure, why not? Now, what I was sick with was the stomach flu. And if you've ever had that, you know one of the worst things about it is the diarrhea. But mine was fairly contained, so I thought to myself, what's the worst that could happen? Fast forward to the date, and we're sitting on the couch. She made me some tea, and we were watching a show on Netflix, when all of a sudden it hits me. I have to go. Badly. I fidget a little and move around until the feeling subsides, because there's no way in hell I'm using her bathroom. The walls are thin and the bathroom is right on the other side of the living room, so she would hear everything. What a way to ruin your chances with a woman you're really into. The feeling gets progressively worse and worse until I'm starting to sweat. I really didn't want to leave her. The things you do for love, am I right? And I finally told her that I need to go home, immediately. She asked if everything was all right. And I said yeah, I just felt I was getting worse and didn't want to get her sick. I didn't leave her much time to argue, and despite her confused looks and pleas, I was out the door. I bet y'all expected the fuck up to happen in the apartment, didn't you? This is where the story really gets good. I'm speeding home because it feels like there's a fireball in my lower intestine. It's late at night, so luckily there's not many cars on the road, and I'm fidgeting around trying to keep this monster inside of me. I must not have realized how I was driving, because about 10 minutes into the parkway, I noticed flashing lights right behind me. At this point, I honestly contemplated pulling over and running into the bushes to relieve myself, but I figured doing so would not do much for my case here. The officer pulls me over and comes to my window, and I guess he noticed the sweating and fidgeting because he asked me to step out the car so he could do some sobriety tests. I tried to explain the situation to him, but all I got out was that I wasn't feeling well before he cut me off and said to just perform the tests and I'll be fine. The first test was easy, ABCs backwards. It wasn't satisfactory to him, and he made me do another one. Stand on one foot and count up from 1,000. Oh no, I couldn't clench and do that. So I start, and I didn't make it to 3 1,000ths before my pants exploded in a very loud way. There was silence, and I was a mix of relieved and horrified. Needless to say, I failed the test, but the officer was just standing there with his stopwatch with a look of shock. I started to say, "I'm sorry," but I got cut off when he burst into laughter. I've never seen a man almost literally roll on the floor laughing. So I was just standing there with my soiled pants, which were getting extremely uncomfortable, and the officer finally stopped laughing and said, "Oh, that explains a lot." He let me go, gave me a sheet to put over my seat, through bouts of laughter, and told me to feel better. I finished my drive home and promptly threw out my clothes. As for my girlfriend, she texted me a bunch throughout the whole debacle, but I just told her I fell asleep as soon as I got home. I'm not ready to tell her the truth yet, so hopefully she doesn't read this post. 2. Backstory. My friend and I have been brewing beer for a couple of years now, and about 6 months ago we took a shot at brewing a bourbon stout, using oak chips instead of an actual barrel. Our plan was to distribute this out to family and friends. However, when we tried it out a couple of times, the beers would foam a bunch upon opening them. We decided to let them settle a little longer and try again in a few months. So I put them in a plastic box in my room under a table. Story cut to yesterday. My girlfriend and I went to a Kentucky Derby party on Saturday and spent the night over there. So my apartment was empty for less than 24 hours once we got back on Sunday. The goal of Sunday was to get home and relax for the rest of the day. However, that was not the case. As we walk towards my room, I feel this crunching sound under my shoe after each step I take. As I get closer to my bedroom doorway, the crunching is more prominent. That is where I see the bottlenecks of beer and glass shards everywhere. When I say everywhere, I mean everywhere. There were glass shards all over the ground, in my closet, in my laundry basket, on my desk, in my bed, in my bathroom. Everywhere. Not only that, but there was beer splattered across the walls and door as well. Even on the opposite walls of the explosion, which I thought was impressive. The pressure must have built up in one of the bottles and exploded, causing a handful of others to do the same, since they were in close proximity to one another. After assessing the damage, we began my plan of attack. Cleaning this shit up, I bring the non-wounded soldiers into the bathroom where I rinse off the beer from them, in the shower so I could store them again. I begin taking them out of the shower and placing them carefully on a bathroom mat, wiping off the water while doing so. The wax seals on the bottle caps seemed to be a nice place for the glass shards to embed themselves, so after picking up a few I realized my hands had tiny cuts in them, and blood began trickling down my fingers. Awesome, more of a mess to clean up, and I don't have band-aids. After removing the last few bottles from the shower, a gunshot sound ripples through the air, and I feel little objects hitting my arms as I shield my face, followed by my girlfriend letting out a shriek. Another bottle exploded. My forearms now have cuts on them, adding to the Jackson Pollock painting of blood drops on the floor. Double awesome. At that moment, I wished I was a wizard like Dumbledore, and could have cast the spell he uses on Voldemort when he sends shards of glass at Dumbledore, and Dumbledore turns into sand. Alas, I am only a measly muggle. Knowing that one of these poor bastards could blow at any moment, and I don't have powers like Dumbledore, priorities have changed. I need to get these suckers out of my place ASAP, and dispose of them. Before I do that, I need some body armor, in case any others decide to blow up in my face again. I cautiously approach the undamaged beers with my body armor. You know when you're blowing up a balloon and it feels like it might explode at any moment in your face? That's what it felt like as I handled each beer and placed them in the trash can. I felt like I was in the amateur version of the Hurt Locker, waiting for one of them to go off and the glass shrapnel to somehow pierce my armor. After 10 grueling minutes, I have all the bottles in the trash bag and we dispose of them. Thank God that is over. We come back in and deal with all the glass, beer, and blood littered throughout the apartment. In the course of doing this, I also saw my cat had puked 4 times, most likely due to the stress of the exploding beers. As much as I know it was not his fault, I couldn't help but mutter like Harry from Home Alone as I cleaned up his puke as well. R.I.P. Bourbon Stout. 3. Obligatory this didn't happen today. I've always been a decent shot. I grew up in a rural area down south and, for most of my childhood, I had safe places to shoot. Most of the time I was shooting BB guns because my dad wasn't dumb enough to let me shoot the rest, without supervision. We did shoot 22 LR, 30-30, 3.06, 20 and 12 GA on Saturdays. We would go shoot trap and skeet and AFB. By the time I was 12, I had shot birds on the wing with my BB gun more than once. BB guns back then, the good ones at least, were way better because you could pump as much air into them as your little heart and muscles desired. 10 to 20 pumps were enough to kill birds, squirrels and rabbits with pellets. 30 or so would suffice for a BB, although accuracy with BBs was a bit less forgiving at range. If you were a real man though, you went for 100 pumps. Around my 12th year, we smuggled our Daisy 840 into the back of the station wagon while packing to go to Toccoa, GA for the holidays. My parents wouldn't have approved, so they didn't have to know. It didn't take long on arrival for us to get into trouble, of course. Out in the woods, I was able to back up a bit of my bragging with marksmanship examples to impress my cousins. Well, being a bit more rural and a lot more devious, they decided to challenge me to hit a bull's balls from across a field. I wasn't sure of the wisdom of this, but between banter and bravado, I did an excellent job of convincing myself it was a do-or-die situation. For those of you unfamiliar with the foothills of the Smoky Mountains, there isn't a lot of flat ground. What pasture there is often has hills and creeks around it, and this pasture was no exception. We had to go down a long path through the woods, cross a seldom paved country road, climb down a steep creek bank, scare off a bunch of otters and climb up another steep creek bank, before reaching the heavy barbed wire fence bordering the pasture. The area near the barbed wire fence was lightly wooded, so we were standing there in the shade looking out at the early afternoon sun, and that bull was right where my cousins had told me he would be, proudly surveying his domain from the top of a knoll in the center of the pasture. This wasn't some pansy-ass bull either. This was a 3,000-pound monster, proudly displaying his rocky, smoky mountain oysters at the top of that rise. Now, I may have been from the country compared to city kids, but I wasn't used to cattle in any way. Even so, I knew at the back of my mind that this was probably a bad idea. Nevertheless, pride wouldn't let me back down at this point. I used a BB, even though the accuracy wouldn't be great, because it wasn't my desire to vasectomize the poor bull. Also, I was out of pellets. We did our standard 100-pump workout, using the fence for the last dozen or so. I lined up the shot on top of the fence itself, braced, and fired high, anticipating considerable drop due to the distance. I wasn't used to shooting uphill, however, so I was actually drawing a bead somewhere around the tail. I don't know if that BB got some lift from the wind or if physical laws broke that day, but I still remember seeing that barely perceived shadow glint of metal streak off and smack that bull right in the asshole as he lifted his tail to swat a fly. That bull must have been a bit dirty because a ring of dust poofed out around its asshole on impact and just framed the whole moment. Now, I don't know if that old bull had been harassed by kids with BB guns before, but he sure found us quick. You know those cartoons where they zoom in on the eyes and the pupils contract as the characters realize just how much shit they have stepped in? Yeah, that asshole puckering moment when you realize you have royally fucked up. That's about how I felt as that bull charged down his hill right at us. We turned and fled, of course, but going down one bank, across a creek and up another bank all covered in orange Georgia clay takes time. More time, it turns out, than a 3,000-pound bull at full charge takes to cross a good-sized pasture. In all my life, I have yet to hear anything remotely like the sound behind us as we were scrambling up that far bank. 3,000 pounds of beef, bone, and fury hitting barbed wire. The tortured cable twang as nails loose their grip on the wire and the crack of splintering fence posts. It didn't even slow that bull down either. At least not appreciably to my memory. He sailed over that creek like he was just going to keep right on coming across us on the far side. Of course he didn't, or I wouldn't be here to tell this story. The creek was fairly deep, maybe knee-deep in the center, but it was a meter or so wide at least. Even so, that bull displaced every drop of water around him when he hit the creek. We could see the mud for a good foot on either side of him on impact. I don't know, but I suspect the cold shock of that fall and creek took the piss and vinegar out of the bull. He sure didn't bother to chase us after that, and we didn't stop to look until we were well up the hill on our way home. The last we saw, he was strolling around on the road, looking a bit confused about what had happened. 4. Warning, this story contains content of drug abuse. This story sounds like it could be listed as funny, but for me, it was a complete fucking nightmare. Ever since I was a young kid, I have experience with all types of drugs. This ruined my life for a long time. But that was a long time ago, and all behind me. While I do have some battle scar stories, this one is by far the scariest for me. Just thinking about it makes me get anxiety. But there was one happy outcome at the end. Stay with me here, this story is weird. I've been diagnosed with bipolar disorder, or also known as the old school term, manic depression. But it's mixed with a dose of intense panic and anxiety issues. It's all some chemical imbalance that didn't start happening until I left high school. This illness runs in my family, and anyone out there listening, know that you aren't alone, and things can and will get better. In 2009, I was already on about 3 medications, when the anxiety and insomnia got worse. The doc at that time prescribed me a strong benzo and sleeping pill. Oh man, I could tell you how much that changed me for the better. My anxiety decreased, my sleep was great, but I always had that devil part of my brain diving into drugs too easily. I developed a tolerance to it, and had to take even more. Now I'm addicted and I don't even realize it. There was this one particular that year where many terrible things had happened to me. My good friend died unexpectedly, my favorite uncle was sentenced to a long bid in prison, and the company I was working for was possibly going to shut out of business. This happened all on the same freaking day. So that night, I went fucking batshit crazy. I didn't want to think about anything and just go numb. I was taking handfuls of both my anxiety and sleeping medicines. And to anyone who's familiar with that road, that's just a blackout waiting to happen. I'll admit one funny thing, I did invite about 20 people to my house for a party that I don't remember at all. That's when I started drinking, and drinking, and drinking. Last I remembered was falling in my yard. So now here's the scary part. I wake up the next morning, and my house is trashed. Luckily all the people who came were actually friends of mine, so nothing was stolen. So I wake up on the roof of my house, with just shorts and someone else's chucks on, that were even too big for me. I slowly climb down the ladder, see a friend passed out on the deck, and I literally don't remember anything from that night. I know. People have been blackout drunk before, but this was some real shit. I've never blacked out so hard that I don't remember anything at all. Without getting into the passed out people in my house, and dismemberment of my couch, people told me a few things had happened. Apparently I punched someone's car window, cracking it, telling people it was someone's car I had a beef with. Turns out it was my own car. Oh, speaking of cars, I fucking drove to 7-Eleven, bought the most random assortment of shit. My friend, who was also drunk, came with me. You see, everyone just thought I was drunk and not mixing it with anything. To then add fuel. When we got out of 7-Eleven, I got into a fight with someone. My friend and even the night manager at 7-Eleven, who I'm cool with, apparently saw this 40-year-old dude, not asking but demanding a cigarette from me. We argued, he swung at me, and I beat the shit out of him. Not to a bloody pulp, but enough to lay him out. Then I threw a cigarette on him and said, "Here, now you earned it." Okay, so we can skip the rest of this mess to later that day. I am cleaning my crusted-over kitchen sink when I hear a loud knock on the door. The police show up at my house, arrest me for assault. Apparently the guy got my plate number and ratted on me. I'm getting processed and go through the motions. I sit on the bench for a while, and eventually I'm thrown into a cell of 10+ people. Still tired, I lean up against the wall and slide my back down and just sit. That's when someone poked my shoulder and was saying, "D, yo, D." I turned to look and couldn't believe it. It was my cousin JJ I hadn't seen in 3 years. We were real close, but had a falling out, so seeing each other was amazing. We hugged and squashed our old beef. Moral of the story is don't mix drugs and alcohol. Unless you want to see your cousin. Just kidding. 5. So, I'm currently in Bangkok for a semester abroad. I'm actually from Germany. FU1. Right now it's the rainy season in Thailand, so every day it rains for an hour or two. And when it rains, it usually pours down like crazy here. University starts, and the first course we have to take is super boring. But there are nice people around and we have a lot of fun during classes. 2 pretty nice girls I met and I want to go and grab something to eat during lunch break when, of course, it starts raining like Buddha personally wanted to send us a big FU from wherever he lives. We light up a cigarette and want to wait it out because we want to enjoy lunch nice and dry. We wait, and of course the rain doesn't stop. We decided to just run house to house so we stay as dry as possible. Pretty big campus. And we arrive at the place where the students can sit and chat during breaks, relatively dry. Now the rain really starts coming down. Like all the heavenly floodgates opened at once. And we can basically go nowhere without swimming there. One of the girls suddenly finds one of the banners that hang everywhere around here, just lying on the ground. Probably because it was also very windy and we think, nice, this thing can get us anywhere without getting totally soaked by the rain. So we grab it, put it over our heads and actually manage to get to the food place, acceptably dry. Awesome. When we arrive there triumphantly, we see some pretty angry looking Thais and all of them look at us. We put the banner to the side and then we see it. Because this banner was not one of those regular banners promoting the university. This was a banner with the King of Thailand printed on it. You have to know, the Thais love their king, and using the king's name the wrong way, or something like this, can get you in big trouble. So we get the hell out of there ashamed of our little accident, but no repercussions. Fortunately. The people who saw us looked like they hated us though. FU2. I used a Lumia 735 phone for the last 3 years, and it worked nicely until the USB socket started acting weird, and it seemed like the charging cable came off very easily. So I dealt with it for some weeks because I thought it was just an old phone getting a little rusty. On the day of the FU, it really started to get on my nerves, and I grabbed a flashlight and pointed into the USB port of my phone. I see some stuff in there that could potentially block a charging cable from fully going in there, and I decide maybe I should clean the socket so the cable can go in there the whole way and stop coming off so easily. I clean the socket with a needle very carefully, because I don't want to damage the pins of the USB connector, and lo and behold, the cable goes in nicely and doesn't come off anymore. Yay! Happily, I went to have dinner with my German buddies, and let my phone charge in my room because the battery was super low. When I come back, I want to check my phone for messages, and notice it doesn't light up like usually. Strange, I think, and try to turn it on. Again, nothing. I pull the charging cable out, put it in again, and the phone display lights up with the usual Nokia logo, but then shuts down abruptly, only to do the same thing again and again. Please phone, not here in Bangkok, I think to myself. Then a little LED light starts blinking like crazy on the front of the phone. I didn't even know the LED existed. I Google what it means and it says critical hardware failure. Awesome. During my repair operation, I think I damaged the USB port so badly that the phone started charging and ended up with critical hardware failure, maybe because of the internal shortage or something like that. I suppose I was not careful enough in cleaning the socket, and damaged the pins of the connector. Buying a new phone was not on my list of expensive shit this month, so now I have only a few euros on my bank account, and what's left in my pocket to pay for food and drinks, and living and shit. I got a very nice deal on a new phone though. Silver linings, right? Hey everyone, Hellfreezer here, and thank you very much for listening to 5 True Embarrassing Stories, episode 41. Thanks to everybody who allowed me to use and sent in stories for use in this video. Well, I hope you guys have some nice plans this weekend, and if you happen to be one of the unfortunate individuals who are working, well, thank you very much for working on the weekend, because you allow those of us who aren't to have a good time off when we're going shopping and doing whatever else we happen to be doing. Which actually reminds me, this weekend I'm going to be planning out the logistics of something I need to do in my garden. In my front garden, I've got this kind of middle section that's been dug out. It was done by my father years ago, and it's kind of overgrown a little bit now. But I need to just basically de-weed it and dig out and edge it a little bit. It's kind of shaped. Oh, how would I say this? Hexagonal, pentagonal. It's kind of a weird shape. I'd usually say it's like a 50-pence piece, but that will only make sense if you're British. But so what I need to do is I need to get that cleared out so that all the weeds are gone. Get the edge around and sharpen the edges up. Then I'm going to have to see what I need to do in order to put chips down, because I've got the idea in my head. This isn't really important to anything, but I'll tell you anyway. The idea in my head, I'd like to put something in the middle, a plant or a bush or some kind in the middle, keep it quite neatly groomed, neatly trimmed, and then I'm going to put white chips around that because I think it would look quite nice. So I'll need to see what I need to put down after I've weeded it. I'm pretty sure you don't just put the chips down themselves. I think you're meant to put some kind of sheeting down to help stop the weeds from coming through. But anyway, yeah, I'll be looking into that and how much that's going to cost me, because I'm quite sure it's going to cost a pretty penny. And if that works out, I'll probably do something similar with my back garden, because, my father used to love to... My father loved his garden, actually, when he was alive, and he used to like to plant vegetables and that sort of thing. That's not something I've ever been interested in, although I helped him with it when I was little, because, kids like to help their parents, but it's not something I had a personal interest in as a hobby. So I'll be doing my best to make the gardens look pretty. Okay, and with that I'm going to head off for now. So until next time, thank you very much for listening, and take very good care of yourselves.